Mr. Chairman. May I say that Mr. Welch talks about this being cruel and reckless. He was just baiting. He has been baiting Mr. Cohen here for hours, requesting that Mr. Cohen, before sundown, get out of any department of the government anyone who is serving the communist cause. Now, I just give this man's record, and I want to say, Mr. Welch, that it has been labeled long before he became a member, as early as 1944.
Senator, may we not drop this? We know he belongs to the Lawyers Guild. And Mr. Cohen nods his head at me. I did you, I think, no personal injury, Mr. Cohen.
No, sir.
I meant to do you no personal injury. And if I did, I beg your pardon. Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You've done enough. Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?
Mr. Rockwell, every member of that panel you testified before today is of the Jewish faith.
Are all of them?
Every member. Now, how do you feel they treated you?
Well, I think that they backed off a lot from what I think they were going to try to do. And I think the fact that a committee of the legislature of the state of New York is composed entirely of Jews bespeaks something which I think is wrong with our country. I don't think that it's right that any group should monopolize an entire section of our legislature.
Mr. Rockwell, you have come before hearings and other meetings dressed in uniform. Why are you not dressed in a uniform today?
I have never come before any hearing dressed in a uniform. I use the uniform to agitate. When Martin Luther King is out in the streets agitating, why, I agitate back. And the uniform is very good for agitating. For appearing before a hearing, it's a mental battle of wits, not a battle of agitation.
Ladies and gentlemen, what is the John Birch Society? An adequate answer to that question requires 2 full days. But we'll give you as much basic understanding of the society in a 30-minute summary as we can. And for that purpose, let's start at the beginning. The John Birch Society was founded in Indianapolis on December 9, 1958. It was chartered under the general laws of Massachusetts as a non-profit educational organization.
The eyes of Texas are upon you all the livelong day.
It's not the individual person of Dallas. It's something evil, festering, stinking in this community.
The eyes of Texas are upon you. You cannot get away.
You who've written stories about the shame of Dallas and the rape of Americanism here know what I'm talking about. There's something that smells. And I want to get back to my own city because I'm going to vomit.
The city of Dallas has always had a strong effect on people. Long before Kennedy had been elected president, Dallas was recognized as a center for right-wing agitation and was home to a number of extremist groups. Yes, the citizens of Dallas were always perceived as a little angrier, a little meaner, and a little louder than the rest of us. And they seemed to like that reputation.
It is my pleasure and privilege, General Walker, to present to you at this time this certificate endowing you with all of the emoluments and the privileges of honorary citizenship in this great city of Dallas. Some years now, and in order to make him feel completely at home and to re-indoctrinate him into the habits and living here in Texas, a strictly hill country hat to General Walker.
On October 24th, Adlai Stevenson was hit by placards wielded by Walker's more aggressive followers.
Shall we get on with the business of the meeting? Surely, my dear friend, I don't have to come here from Illinois to teach Texas manners, do I?
And on November 19th, 2 days before the arrival of President Kennedy, Alabama Governor George Wallace used Dallas to announce his candidacy to head the Democratic ticket for president.
I was in San Antonio and Amarillo. In fact, I have many friends in this great state. And in the struggle in which we are engaged now, involving the matter of constitutional government, I feel that there will be no stronger ally than that of the great state of Texas come next year, November 1964.
The atmosphere in Dallas on the eve of Kennedy's visit was tense, taut, and violent. Police Chief Jess Curry was concerned enough to confront the atmosphere in a statewide television address.
Because of the unfortunate incident which occurred here during the visit of Ambassador Stevenson, people everywhere in the world will be hypercritical of our behavior. Nothing must occur that is disrespectful or degrading to the President of the United States. He is entitled to the highest respect of all of our citizens. And the law enforcement agencies in this area are going to do everything within their power to ensure that no untoward accident or incident occurs. We will take immediate action if any suspicious conduct is observed. And we also urge all good citizens to be alert for such conduct.
Lester Maddox ran a small cafeteria on what's now the Georgia Tech campus. And Lester Maddox was an ardent supporter of the system of segregation.
He was a segregationist, believed that he could run his business and serve to whomever he wanted. And that's pretty well the way he ran that business until the Civil Rights Movement, and he began to be challenged about it. Folks came to be admitted, and he resisted. He and others picked up some axe handles and ran folks off in front of cameras.
He saw that desegregation was going to run his business, and so he was a vocal supporter of segregation and an opponent of the political leaders who were making accommodations.
And when in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed and ratified, Maddox decided to close his cafeteria instead of observing the law. He had an interest in politics, and he ran for governor. He unexpectedly won the Democratic primary, to the surprise of many people. It obviously was a protest vote on the part of many white voters. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, he refused to lower the state flags in honor of his death.
Duke. Mr. Duke is, what is your title?
Grand Wizard or National Director.
You are Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
He's such a nice-looking boy. You know what I mean. I don't mean to be flip about what
I know.
People are surprised, huh?
I guess so, because Hollywood's got this image that anybody who believes in their own race, if they're white and wants to preserve it and have their children go to decent schools and grow up believing in this country, they've got to somehow be old, they got to have a big beer belly, they got to be dirty, and I don't think that's the right image.
You don't even chew tobacco, huh, Mr. Duke?
No, we'll spearmint juicy fruit once in a while.
Well, Wolf, that memo and some notes on it from a man believed to be Fox News founder Roger Ailes shows that as far back as 1970, conservative leaders and their media consultants had a plan to influence TV news.
He's fair and balanced.
They say they're a fair and balanced alternative to the liberal media. Did Roger Ailes have a blueprint for his Fox News channel in the early days of the Nixon White House? CNN obtained an early 70s memo from the Nixon Library entitled A Plan for Putting the GOP on TV News. A Nixon aide wants to create a news service to provide pro-administration videotape hard news actualities to the major cities of the United States. They want to do that on local TV stations to circumvent the broadcast networks. It's not clear who wrote the memo. The Nixon Library tells us it's in the files of Nixon's later convicted chief of staff, H.R. Bob Haldeman. But there's handwriting all over it with detailed suggestions on how to make the plan work. The person writes, Bob, if you decide to go ahead, we would, as a production company, like to bid on packaging the entire project. He later signs off, best regards, Roger. The website Gawker, which first discovered this, says the handwriting is that of Roger Ailes, then an outside media consultant for Nixon.
David Duke, a former Grand Wizard of the Klan, won a seat in the Louisiana legislature.
David Duke has been trying to shed his image as a cross-burning Klansman for almost 10 years now. He's still having difficulty doing that with a lot of people.
This is not the issue of this campaign. It's not a Jewish, Christian issue or controversy. It's not a black-white controversy. I'm an individual standing up for equal rights for everybody.
He did persuade a little more than half of the voters who went to the polls this weekend that he should be elected to the Louisiana legislature. Political analysts say there are several reasons why Duke won. First of all, he was a better campaigner than his opponent. And second, he was saying what a lot of voters wanted to hear, that whites should have rights as well as minorities. When Duke left the Klan, he founded the National Association for the Advancement of White People.
It's not a question of being against minorities at all. It's simply a question of making sure that our rights are also protected. That if we're going to have civil rights in America, we must have civil rights for everyone and not a chosen few.
David Duke has been repudiated by his party, vilified by his opponents, exposed as a racist in this TV commercial.
My victory. My victory.
And yet a large number of voters support Duke in his race against the incumbent Democrat J. Bennett Johnston, who calls Duke a lying racist. Duke, who campaigns against affirmative action and welfare mothers, claims that Johnston was once a segregationist.
He still seems to be for racial discrimination. Only now it's against whites instead of blacks.
The polls indicate Johnston is clearly the frontrunner in this race. But the polls have notoriously underestimated David Duke before. He's expected to get a lot of votes Saturday. And if he does lose, the message of his campaign will linger long after the election.
Former Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke is officially running for the governor of Louisiana. Shunned by fellow Republicans and turned down by voters in the last election, Duke still predicts victory this fall. Gary Mattingly of WDSU reports.
David Duke is not letting his controversial past stop him from getting to the governor's mansion. The state representative from suburban New Orleans is the latest in a field of candidates trying to win that post. Duke tried unsuccessfully to get into the U.S. Senate, but his showing was impressive, getting more than 40% of the vote. This time, Duke says he's more confident the votes will be there to take him over the top.
I can guarantee you that the Republican vote will not be split. I'll receive 85% of the Republican vote in this election, plus a great percentage of the Democratic vote.
Once again, Duke will have to contend with the groups trying to block his candidacy. Reverend James Stovall is with the Louisiana Coalition Against Racism and Nazism.
We think that the image of David Duke is such that he will not get the vote again that he did once before.
In truth, I'm a simple man and quite unremarkable in my talents. Yet I'm smart enough to recognize the harsh realities and maybe dumb enough to verbalize that understanding out loud. Every political rule I break, but I'm not broken.
While Duke failed in his attempt to make it to the U.S. Senate, this time he feels his chances are very good for making it to the governor's mansion.
This emblem up here is a symbol of the Aryan Nations. That is your race. You see that inverted swastika, the sword passing through it. The symbolization of that is the resurrection from the death of our people by Professor Waddell, the great Aryan historian, who said that symbol denoted nothing less than the resurrection and the victory of the Aryan race over the darkness of death and hell.
Annual Aryan World Congresses.
Richard Butler was not a person that was dynamic, and he was not a great speaker, but he was quite effective at publicity. And so he was able to get a lot of publicity, not only with national media, but even at times international media. And I think they were fascinated with the idea that he created these two organizations. It was somewhat unique in the sense that his political arm, which was neo-Nazi, or really not the Nazi doctrine, was the political arm, and then to have a religious arm, which was very different from Nazism in Germany when Hitler did not have the religious component. That really resonated with interest with the national media. And so they would come, and he would do two things a year that would draw media. Oftentimes in April, he would have a Racist Skinhead Youth Conference. And then in July, he'd have his so-called World Congress of the Aryan Nations, and he would draw about 300 in the mid-'80s at that each year. They'd come from Canada and all over the United States.
After the 2000 verdict, Butler was homeless. But some multimillionaires who shared Richard Butler's beliefs stepped forward and bought him a house in Hayden, Idaho, and he continued his church services and continued functioning as the Aryan Nations in a country rancher in suburban Hayden, Idaho. He didn't have his church any longer. He didn't have the bunkhouse and his 20 acres to burn crosses, but they continued having the Aryan World Congress. They actually had their congresses at state parks. They went to different campgrounds and actually continued to burn smaller versions of cross burnings every summer. So right up until the summer of his death, 2004, he continued on with his Aryan World Congresses. So even without his compound, he continued to try and pound the drum of the Aryan Nations. That all ended, I have to tell you, though, pretty much in 2004, in North Idaho at least, with the death of Richard Butler.
While the new president comes to office on a wave of goodwill and popular support, there are still those who wish him harm or worse. The people whose job it is to keep President Obama safe say they are alarmed at the growing tide of threats. Jeannie Meserve reports.
During the inauguration, security around President Obama was unprecedented. Expect that to continue. A bulletin issued earlier this month by the FBI and Department of Homeland Security said Mr. Obama has been the focus of voluminous threat-related reporting since announcing his candidacy, and the number of threat reports has increased since his election. The websites and chat rooms of white supremacists have seethed with hate.
The idea of a black man in the White House is an utter anathema. They think that this represents this sort of stealing of the nation which they imagine as having been created as a kind of Christian white entity.
The FBI says it is watching the chatter, looking for threats.
I think we've been very, very aggressive in looking at the potential of any white supremacy or domestic terrorism group to take some sort of action.
The outpouring of emotion for the Obama presidency may make him a target of another group, the psychologically dangerous,
You're saying you're fully committed. You know, there's no future if we don't take this country back. Donald Trump, I hope you can help uncripple America.
You'll be looking at me in a year or 2 years. Let's give me a little bit of a time to run things. But a year into office, you'll be saying, wow, I remember that interview. He said he was going to do it, and he did a great job. You'll be very...
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory! No one will honor us for losing gracefully. No one mourns the great crimes committed against us. For us, it is conquer or die. The mainstream media, or perhaps we should refer to them in the original German, Lügenpresse. It's not just that they are leftist and cucks. It's not just that many are genuinely stupid. Indeed, one wonders if these people are people at all. Or instead soulless Gollum, animated by some dark power to repeat whatever talking point John Oliver stated the night before. To be white is to be a striver, a crusader, an explorer, and a conqueror. We build, we produce, we go upward. And we recognize the central lie of American race relations. We don't exploit other groups. We don't gain anything from their presence. They need us and not the other way around. Within the very blood in our veins as children of the sun lies the potential for greatness. That is the great struggle we are called to. We are not meant to live in shame and weakness and disgrace. We were not meant to beg for moral validation from some of the most despicable creatures to ever populate the planet. We were meant to overcome all of it, because that is natural and normal for us. The press has clearly decided to double down and wage war against the legitimacy of Trump and the continued existence of white America. But they are really opening up the door for us. America was, until this past generation, a white country designed for ourselves and our posterity. It is our creation. It is our inheritance. And it belongs to us.
This morning, new fallout from inside the president's own party, blasting what they see not just as a political failure, but a moral one after the violence in Charlottesville.
But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay?
The president, combative and defiant, unleashing and unscripted.
I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either.
John McCain writing, "There's no moral equivalency between racists and Americans standing up to defy hate and bigotry. The President of the United States should say so." Where the rally, organized by white nationalists, featured some demonstrators carrying Nazi and Confederate flags and chanting racist and anti-Semitic taunts.
You had some very bad people in that group, but you also had people that were very fine people on both sides.
The president's extraordinary exchange with reporters stunned even his own advisors. One senior White House official telling NBC News the president went rogue. He was originally set to talk infrastructure, then leave his advisors to answer questions. Instead, he did himself, as new Chief of Staff John Kelly stood to the side, appearing to visibly flinch, lowering his head and crossing his arms.
You had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent.
Do you think that what you call the alt-left is the same as neo-Nazis?
Oh, those people, all of those people, excuse me, I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups, but not all of those people were neo-Nazis, believe me. Not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch. Those people were also there because they wanted to protest the taking down of a statue, Robert E. Lee.
Now, the former Grand Wizard of the KKK is thanking the president for his honesty and courage. And alt-right leader Richard Spencer tells The Atlantic he's proud of President Trump.
I'm telling you, folks, look, I know these people probably better than anybody. And a lot of people have a problem with it because, look, what happens with them, if they're doing a story about me, I know if it's honest or false. If you're reading a story about somebody, you don't know. You assume it's honest because it's like the failing New York Times, which is like so bad. It's so bad. Or the Washington Post, which I call a lobbying tool for Amazon. Okay, that's a lobbying tool for Amazon. Or CNN, which is so bad and so pathetic, and their ratings are going down. Right there. Straight to this guy right there.
Something like this might happen in Afghanistan or Iraq or something like that, but you don't expect it to happen in a little sleepy office across the street from the local mall. But we're still putting out a newspaper.
You'll see me in my blue shirt.
Any words about the dead in Annapolis? Any words about the dead in Annapolis, Mr. President? Can you talk about the active shootings in Annapolis? Could you please talk to us about the dead reporters in Annapolis?